Have you ever wondered what people did for leisure back in the day, without cell phones, social media, cars, etc.? If you are wondering this, then you're in the right place. Today we will take a look back at the leisure activities that both males and females engaged in during colonial American times. It is safe to say that the amount of time spent doing leisure activities was a lot less than in today's society. The amount of time an individual spent depended on the amount of time that they had after completing their daily work duties. The type of leisure that an individual engaged in also heavily depended on their social standing within the community. To begin, we will discuss how children in colonial America spent their leisure time. Since there were no iPads, video games, and other advanced technology, children relied mainly on their imagination to have fun. Most of the toys and games that children played with were made of scraps and things that were not needed. For example, girls would make dolls out of corn husks, rags, and even use a dried apple for the head. Boys would even use sticks to mimic a horse. Most families had about 6 to 7 children, so most of the time, the children were able to keep themselves occupied for the most part. In addition to making up games, children would play games that are still familiar today. These games include jump rope, tennis, swings, hopscotch, leapfrog, hide and seek, and tag. An extremely popular game that was played among children was called rolling the hoop. Children would get a large wooden hoop and race each other to a finish line. These wooden hoops were similar to hula hoops that are popular in the 21st century. The climate played a role in what children would do. During the warmer months, children would swim in lakes to cool off, and when it would snow, children would go sledding and have snowball fights. The sled had not been invented yet, so children used objects around the house that could be used as a sled. Even when children were working, they would be making games out of it. Whether they were carrying wood, husking corn, picking berries, carding wool, or gathering eggs, many of them would make it a contest to see who could carry the most amount of something or do something the fastest. Singing, riddle, telling, tongue twisters, and rhyming were popular activities that children also partook in. Some popular colonial riddles include: what kind of room is not in a house? Pause the video to think about this. The answer is a mushroom. Another riddle is: what has 3 feet but cannot walk? The answer to this one is a yardstick. As a child grew up, they began participating in different activities during their teenage years. Teenage girls were much more limited on what they could do than the boys were. Girls were expected to become ladies of the household and only received education necessary for their future duties within the household. Writing was taught as a specialized skill, and it wasn't necessary for girls to learn unless they were wealthy enough to do so. Boys learning penmanship was the equivalent of girls learning to sew. Boys were expected to know what they wanted to do with their life at a very young age. Their options included becoming an apprentice, continuing their education, or joining the militia or church. Teenage girls spent many years being taught social skills and etiquette. Going to dances and spending time at the theater were common leisure activities spent by wealthier families. At dances, teenage girls were expected to behave themselves and act properly. Dances in colonial time were much different than college parties that are seen today in the 21st century. Card games, dominoes, board games, wrestling, gambling, and various ball games such as wicket and backgammon were common among teenage boys. Now we will take a look back at the activities that mothers and fathers engaged in during the colonial era. Men were able to have more fun while their wives stayed home to work and care for the children. Men typically spent their free times in taverns and participating in militia drills.
Hen, 1, hen, 2, hen, 3.
Men would often take their family dogs out to go hunting in the woods. Baiting, boxing, and cockfighting were common, along with some other dangerous activities that include knife and tomahawk throwing, running, and shooting.
Now wrestle!
No.
If a family wasn't wealthy enough to attend dances or the theater, they often spent their time visiting family friends or attending various festivals. Leisure in the colonial era was much different than leisure spent in the 21st century. Thanks to technological advances, there have been many more ways developed to spend leisure time. Time spent engaging in leisure is much more plentiful here in the 21st century.